Record. Okay, so let me tell you what we're going to do tonight. It's going to be a little bit different. I'll tell you where we're starting the text in a minute. I guess I should put it on the screen. I'd even, that'd be helpful. So, okay, we're not doing tefillah. Let me get the right thing open here. Tanya chapter 16. Let's see. Okay. Good. Make this a little bigger and I'll share the screen. Come back to y'all. Okay. What we're going to do, we're going to read a whole bunch of lines. I'll give you, explain. First, I'll catch up on where we're holding right now, of course. And then we're going to listen for about 25 minutes to my Tanya mentor, who I learned Tanya from. And I'll explain to you why I want to hear him speak about this part. But first, let's take a look at the text. Where we're holding right now is right after these brackets where it says Ho'il Utfuna. Let me just first kind of bring us up to speed what's going on here. We're actually going to start right over here. We had said that when a person, before they do a mitzvah, before they daven, before they engage in something, they say that they want to do this the right way, the best way possible, even though they're not necessarily able to, even though their heart may not be 100% into it. In any case, the fact that they make that statement that they want to do the best possible, and that's this, sometimes it's l'shem yichud kuchabrichu, it could be different, or hineni muchanum zuman, all these different introductory paragraphs. What that does is it infuses the mitzvah to such an extent with the bedechilu urechimu, with awe and with love, that the mitzvah is, once you do it, no matter what level you do it at, this ki'ilu was done to the best possible level, and you infused it with a neshama. In a metaphor, in a spiritual sense, you've infused that neshama, that mitzvah with a neshama. So what we're going to do is I'm going to read a bunch of lines and explain, and then I'll give you a little segue into this video. Okay, why does this work? If you just look at the red part here, jump back for a second. When you had this, you said with your mouth, you actually said, I'm doing this. I want to help. This is the best way possible. I'm really into this mitzvah. It's when you do it, it's as if you did it the best way possible. Why? Because Hashem himself sees it, ki'ilu, you did that mitzvah the best way possible. You do your part, Hashem does his part. Now, watch what happens. Ho'il utvunato zo shebemocho v'ta'alumot libo, hi hamaviato la'asok bahem. Since your mind, the tvuna, the insight, the thought process you had, and your inner heart are what brings you to do the mitzvah in the first place. V'lulei hashaya mitbonem bitvuna zo. And maybe had you not even said, I'm ready to do such and such a mitzvah, you may never even have done the mitzvah. Maybe he'll just have been involved in doing his own, whatever he needs physically for himself instead of doing the mitzvah. And even somebody who naturally is always learning, just in a natural state, he loves his own physical body more than maybe doing the mitzvot. Then what happens is that we said that what happens is that it infuses the mitzvah with the neshama, and it has gadfin, these wings, and these wings of dechilu rechimu, or yirah and ahava, awe / fear and love, and they take that mitzvah up to the shamayim. Okay, very nice idea. Now listen to what the Admor HaZaken does with this idea. I'm sure many of you have heard this expression before. Let me make sure you know what it is before we go into it. There's an expression that's found in the Gemara and in many places. You'll see it on the top line here. Let me make the screen a little bigger even. That a machashava tova HaKadosh Baruch Hu mitzarfa l'ma'aseh, which we translate literally means that a good intention, a good thought, Hashem connects it to an action. And the way we normally translate that is, let's say I woke up and I say, you know what, I'm going to go to davening a few minutes earlier because I want to sit there and I want to learn Mishnayot before davening. All of a sudden, I'm about to walk out the door and I realized I can't find my sefer. And I go looking for it, By the time I finally get to shul, it's too late. I have to just daven. As far as we're concerned, as far as Hashem's concerned, it's ki'ilu you did the mitzvah. Why? Because machashava tova kadosh baruch hu mitzarfa lema'aseh. A good intention, a good thought, Hashem makes it as if you did the mitzvah. It doesn't mean I can wake up in the morning and say, oh, you know what, I'm going to give $1 million to tzedakah today. Well, at least I had the idea, the intention, so Hashem's going to say, ki'ilu you did it. No. It has to be something you really intended to do, and something out of your control stopped you from doing it. So let's take a look at what the Admor HaZaken does with this idea, connecting it to the rest of this chapter before. This is what the Chazal, what Chachamim Zichronam Livracha hinted to us by saying, really what it should have said is, it should have said that if you had a good intention, then Hashem looks at it as if ki'ilu asa, that you did it. What do you mean? Mitzarfa lema'aseh. You joined it to the action. What is it talking about? Elainyan, but rather it means as follows. Ki dechilu urechimu deshabhitkaluto bihitkalut libo. Hem hamitlabshim ma'aseh mitzvot lacheotam leparcha la'ela. That you're infusing this mitzvah with your thoughts of you want to do it properly, you want to do it with the proper awe and the proper love, and it will come to fruition within your heart. And then they get enrobed, so to speak, when the actual ma'aseh mitzvah, it gives it the power, lahachayotam, to give it life. This mitzvah is given life, the parcha la'ela, to go fly up, so to speak, to the heavens. Let me just read the whole thing and you'll understand what I'm saying. Because the heart is also physical. What happens when you do, we saw before, that when you do this, you say the Shem Yichu Kucha, Brichu, or you even just say, I want to do this mitzvah the best way possible, and I want to infuse it somehow with love and with awe, that it has the power to bring it up. But this awe and this love that's in your mind, or that it's hidden inside your heart, as mentioned before, they're all the way up here. Here's the maaseh. Here's the action you're taking. Here's the mitzvah you're doing. But this idea of it, this thought process, it's all the way up here, right? So you have the action you actually do. You put on the tefillin, you take the challah, you do whatever it is, but your intentions, the chilu rechimo, kind of up here, right? Here's the maaseh, and here's those ideas of and here I'm prepared, ready to do the mitzvah, right? They're separate entities. And this intention we just said, right? We said that this infuses this mitzvah with an neshama to allow it to fly up, but they're really separate things at the moment. What happens? Whoops. Hold on, sorry. Down. Imlo shahakadosh baruch hu mitzarfan umechabran lebechinat ha'maaseh. What does it mean? Machashava tova kadosh baruch hu mitzarfan lemaaseh means as follows. Here's the maaseh. Here's the mitzvah you're about to do. Here's this idea of I'm prepared to do it the best way possible. They're two separate entities. But what does Hashem do? He connects them. He said, you did your part. You're doing the mitzvah. You said you want to do it the best way possible. I'm going to take them and I'm going to combine the two. And that mitzvah is going to have a neshama to fly up to heaven. Again, metaphorically speaking. So when it says, this idea that you want to do the mitzvah the best way possible is what's called machashava tova, good thought. Why? They're not truly the real awe. It's not really the true, complete, unadulterated love in your heart. All it is something in your imagination. It's in the recesses of your mind. So what does it mean, according to the Admor HaZaken? Oops, it's not what I want to take it off of here. What does it mean, according to Admor HaZaken, when we say that Kadosh Baruch Hu mitzarfa lema'aseh a machashava tova. So it's two things. One is exactly what we said at the beginning. If you have a good intention, you want to do an action, you want to do a mitzvah, and something beyond your control comes up, prevents you from doing it. Okay, Hashem looks at it as if you did it. That's one way. But the Marzakain takes it even further. He says that if that's the case, it's not really the right expression. It should say that a machashava tova, Hashem should look at it as if it was done. What's this tziruf? What's the hitztaref? What does it mean to join? What's the tziruf? So he says, now we're going to take what we said in the first half of this chapter. And he said, when you say before you do a mitzvah, or at least you have the intention, I want to do this the best way possible. Once you said that this idea is floating up here, here's your mitzvah that you actually do. Now Hashem mitzaref, this machashava tova, this good intention of doing the mitzvah the best way, to the ma'aseh, combines them, and they have these little gadfin, the wings of yirah and ahava, of fear / awe and love, and that lifts the mitzvah up to the shamayim. It's a powerful idea, a powerful statement that he makes, and it gives a much deeper understanding to what this is when we say Hakadosh Baruch Hu mitzarfa lema'aseh. Now, I was just describing, and I did it on purpose to physically show you this idea that the brain of the thought is kind of floating up here. Sorry, 1 second. And the mitzvah is here, two separate entities. The last few lines of this chapter, I could read and translate if you want me to, but you're going to miss something critical. It's possible that I'm going to play this Rav's like for 20 minutes or so, at least 20, 25 minutes of what he says, that it'll say like, I don't know what he's talking about, but even though he speaks quite eloquently and very clearly, even though it's Lashon Ashkenazis, it's okay, we'll forgive him. Or you'll find that it really speaks to you. It's a little bit of some Kabbalistic stuff, which very little is dealt with in Sefer Tanya. But I think it's interesting because even if you only pick up pieces of it, he's going to talk about the number 4. He's going to talk about this idea of something that's floating up here and the stuff that's down here. So with your permission, I'm going to play this video. Is Rabbi Silberberg. He lives in Crown Heights, or at least he gives a share in Crown Heights. I'm not sure he lives there. He's from Detroit originally. I've shown one video of his before, just like a couple minutes, but this one will be more intense or a little longer because I can just tell you what he said, but it better to hear it from him directly.
So we're holding on page 44. So last week we were talking about how when a person does a mitzvah, so the feeling with which the person does the mitzvah, the ahava and the yira, the love for Hashem and the awe for Hashem, they become the wings.
You can hear it, yes? Just someone shake their head, yes? Okay, good.
And they allow the mitzvah to fly up to the heavens. If you look in Kabbalah, in the Sifrei Kabbalah, they're a little more specific about what this means. I don't know if we ever discussed the 4 worlds, the 4 spiritual worlds. Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. But for those who have any familiarity at all with Kabbalah, we know that there's something called Seder HaYishtalshelus, which means that it's a chain of spiritual worlds emanating from Hashem, culminating with our world down here, our world being the final and the last and the lowest rung on this chain, lowest link in the chain. And generally speaking, Kabbalah talks about 4 worlds, 4 spiritual worlds. Atzilus is the highest spiritual world, and then you have Yetzirah, and then Bria, and then Olam HaAsiya, the world of Asiya. And then there's the Olam Asiya Haruchnis, there's the spiritual Olam Asiya, and then there's the Olam Asiya Gashmis, the physical Olam Asiya, which is the world that we inhabit. So in the Sifrei Kabbalah it says like this, that when a person does a mitzvah with Ava and Yira, so the Ava and Yira become the wings, and they allow the mitzvah to fly up to either the world of Yetzira or the world of Bria. That depends on the nature of the Ava of Yira. And this is going to be discussed at length later on in the late 30s, in the chapter 38 and 39 of Tanya, but just a little taste of what this is all about. So in the Sfarim it says like this: if the person's Ava V'yira, the person's love and fear for Hashem, are Ava V'yira Sichliim, they are Ava and Yira that began in the intellect, meaning the person created Ava V'yira by meditating and contemplating and thinking into the greatness of Hashem and studying about Hashem. As the Rambam says, how is the way to come, or what is the way to come to love Hashem? So the Rambam talks about it in Hilchos Yisei HaTorah. When a person looks around and sees all of creation and thinks about Hashem and Hashem's greatness of having created everything, and then the person thinks about the Maisa HaMarkava, which is even higher, thinks about all the Malachim, which is really the process that we actually try to do every single day in davening. The whole point of Psuki de Zimra and the Birchas Krishma is to, if a person is having kavana and thinking about what he's saying and thinking about the greatness of Hashem, who the creator of everything, that brings the person to the point that when he says V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha by Krishma, he's holding by V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha, Itaka has a love for Hashem. So that's called Ava V'yira Sichlis. And if a person has Ava V'yira Sichlis, then, and that is the motivation, the energy, the passion behind the mitzvah, so then that mitzvah flies up to the world of Elam Habriya. If the Ava V'yira, the fear and the love of Hashem, is what's called Ava V'yira Tivim, in other words, they didn't start in the mind, but they're instinctive, which means that they draw upon the natural love that a Yid has for Hashem, which we're going to discuss at length from chapter 18 and on. In other words, pretty soon, within the next few shiurim, we're going to start talking about what is this Ava V'yira Tivi, what does this mean, this natural love that every Yid has for Hashem, and how do we draw upon it. But if the person is using Ava V'yira Tivi, which means that it's purely emotional, it did not start in the intellect, so then the mitzvah goes up to the world of Yetzirah, which is the world beneath that. And I want to talk a little about that, what that means. When we talk about worlds, spiritual worlds, Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, we're not talking about places. It's not pshat that one day NASA will be able to make a spaceship that is so powerful that it'll be able to get us to Elam Habriya, and then maybe afterwards, after they land some people on Mars, they'll even get us that we can go to Elam HaYetzirah also. These aren't places. It's not, they're not rungs in a physical ladder, because, as we mentioned in the past, spiritual entities are not three-dimensional, and they don't take up any space. They're here, there, they're everywhere. They're everywhere and nowhere at the same time. Nowhere in the sense of they don't occupy place like a physical object, but they're everywhere. So when we talk about these worlds, what are we talking about? When we talk about levels, gradations, one thing being higher than the other, one madrig in Kedusha which is higher, or a world which is higher, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about levels of Kedusha. Atzilus is a higher level of Kedusha than is Bria, and Bria is a higher level of Kedusha than is Yetzirah, and Yetzirah is a higher level of Kedusha than is Asiya.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar at all with these four worlds. Did the Rav explain them?
No, that's what we're going to be talking about today.
I have no idea what they are.
In Kabbalah, for right now, all you need to know is that in Kabbalah it talks about, generally speaking, there are four spiritual worlds. And their levels, the highest level is the world of Atzilus, and then you have Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, and then you have our world. But we're not talking about locations or places, we're talking about Madrigas and Kedusha, meaning that you can have a person who's alive over here and walking in this world, but that person is really in Atzilus. You can have another person who's inhabiting this world, but he's in Elam Abriya, meaning that this person has achieved the level of Atzilus, that level of Kedusha. And what is Kedusha? I know this is asking the obvious, But those of you who were here when we learned Perek Daled and Tanya and Perek Hey and Tanya, maybe some of you remember, what is the definition of Kedusha? The definition of Kedusha is Bittul to Hashem. Bittul, Hismatlos. Less ego, more Kedusha. More ego, less Kedusha. The more I feel myself and my identity, the less connection I have to Hashem. Because you realize, when we're talking about levels, everything is like a one-way glass. It's like, in some shows they have a mechitza with one-way glass. It's all a one-way glass, because from Hashem's perspective, everything is Elokus, everything is holiness, everything is Him. Ein oid movade. There's nothing other than Hashem. And there's no difference between Elam Atzilus and Elam Abriya and our world. There's no difference between anything. Because from Hashem's perspective, everything is just a manifestation of and an expression of Him and His power. So whenever we're talking about different levels, we're talking about only from the perspective from down here, from our perspective.
Yeah.
The only thing that can separate anything from Hashem is the entity's own awareness and consciousness and feeling of separation from Hashem. What separates me from Hashem is that I feel separate. I have my ego. I feel me. The less I feel me, the less I feel my ego, the more bottle I am to Hashem, the more holy I am. And that's, we discussed this in the past. That's true about people, it's true about actions, it's true about objects. What makes a Sefer Torah holy? What makes the act of a mitzvah holy? Because a Sefer Torah is more bottle to Hashem. Meaning, if you look at a Sefer Torah, what do you see? Something which expresses Hashem's will. The act of a mitzvah expresses bittul to Hashem, obedience to Hashem. That's why it's a holy act. What makes a person holy? The person that's less self-centered and less egotistical and more given over to Hashem. So the four worlds of Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, they represent gradations in bittul to Hashem. When you're completely bottled, that's the world of Atzilus. And then a little less bottle, that's the next world, a little less bottle, that's then the next world, and then the next, even less bottle, then you're at the final world in the world of Asiyah. In Kabbalah it's explained that the four worlds, Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiyah, they correspond to the four letters in Hashem's name. The Yud, and the Hey, and the Vav, and the Hey. And because all of creation comes from the four letters of Hashem's name, that's why creation in general is divided into four. What are examples of creation being divided into four? You have Daimim, Tzemeach, Chaim, Daber, all creation, right? And then you have the four elements are Eish, Ruach, Maim, and Afar. You have four seasons, very good, right? The four corners of the world, four directions. I know it seems obvious there are four directions, but Hashem wanted the world would have been five directions. The fact that it's four directions, these are all a reflection of the fact that everything that's created is created by the name of Yudke Vavke, also known as Shem Havaya, and therefore the world comes down in multiples of four. Now, the four letters of Hashem's name, the Yud, and the Hey, and the Vav, and the Hey. It's a shame we don't have a blackboard over here, or a whiteboard, to put all these things together. They correspond to the 10 spheres. And the 10 spheres we did talk about. The 10 spheres, the 10 koiches, Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, etc. And Kabbalah says like this. The letter Yud of Hashem's name represents Chachma. The Hey represents Bina. Now, I'm going to go back over this and we're going to expand on this a bit. So again, the Hey represents Bina. The Vav of Hashem's name is the 6 Midos, Chesed, Gevurah, Tiferes, Netzach, Chod, and Yesod. And the final Hey is Malchus. So again, the Yud is Chachma. What is Chachma? What is wisdom? As we spoke about in the past in Perek Beis and Tanya, wisdom is bittul. In fact, the word Chachma is made up of the words Koyach Ma. The Koyach of Ma, what is this? What is it's bottle without an identity. So Chachma is absolute bittul. The Hey is Bina. Bina represents comprehension. When I comprehend something, the bittul that I'm feeling is much less than Chachma. Chachma is when I'm totally receptive. I'm receiving something from someone else. I am being batal. So therefore, Bina is not as batal as is Chachma. It's a level down. The Yud is the highest level. The Hey is a level down. There's more Yeshus, what we call. There's more ego in Bina than there is in Chachma. Bina is comprehension, and Chachma is a definition of Bittul.
Why is Chachma the definition of bittul?
Why is the definition of Chachma Bittul? Because if Bina is comprehension, Chachma is reception. I don't. It's being mekabel. I don't want to go into this in too long, because it's a topic all for itself. Chachma and Bina is like Re'iyah and Shmiya. Re'iyah, when I see something, it is being revealed to me. Shmiya, when I have to understand something, I have to grasp it. That's my comprehension, my understanding. So Bina is where I take over. Chachma is what I hear from someone else, what I'm mekabel. It's my bittul. It could be something I'm mekabel even from very deep place within myself. But it's not about my conscious koyach of comprehension and cognition.
What about Das?
We're not counting das.
That's the final product, isn't it?
Das is not an entity for itself. Das is the key that allows the Bina to come expressed in Midas. Das is connection. Das is when I'm connecting to that which I understand, and that allows me then to have feelings. For whatever reason, we're not counting Das. Sometimes Das isn't counted. Sometimes Kesser isn't counted. We're not going to get into that right now. There's a Kabbalistic reason why it's not counted, but it's for another day. It's actually the real place where this is discussed in Tanya is in Igeres HaTshuva, chapter 5. It'll be a long time till we get there. Right.
Which one? Which one?
So Vav, the Vav of Hashem's name is the Midas. Emotions. Emotions are more yeshazdik, are more egotistical, are more self-centered than is seichel, than is intellect. Intellect, after all, is objective. In fact, subjectivity, when I insert and inject myself and my benefit and my interest into what I'm trying to understand, I'm likely not to come up to the correct conclusion. The purest seichel, the purest intellect, is the more I can push myself to the side, and the more I can look with a complete disinterest and with a total objectivity. So seichel is more bittul, is more batal than is midas. Midas is I like, I don't like, how do I feel about something? It's emotions. So again, what do we have? We start chachma, which is absolute bittul, and then a level beneath that is olam habriya, which is seichel, which is less bittul. Then we have the vav, which is the midas, which is even less batal. And then we have the hey, which is malchus, which is action, which action is even less batal. In other words, over there, in that whole chain of thing, it becomes that's the least where it's felt. The nefesh is felt in there. I don't want to focus too much on malchus now, because that'll be a little of a distraction. But the point is, we have here the four worlds correspond to the Yud, the Hey, the Vav, and the Hey, and they correspond also to Chachma, Bina, Midas, Malchus. So that means, in Olam Atzilus, the highest world, what makes it the highest world? The fact that there's absolute bittul over there. So someone who lives in this world, but we're talking about the greatest tzaddikim that exist, and there's a complete lack of ego, something which is hard for us to relate to, a complete lack of ego. Even if we're holy people and good people, but the utter transcendence of self and complete service of Hashem with absolutely no self-benefit as the motivation. That's the avodah of the greatest tzaddikim that ever existed. Moshe Rabbeinu. There we go. Exactly, right. Moshe Rabbeinu was a neshama straight from Atzilus. In fact, that's why he was called Moshe. Moshe means he was pulled out from the water. The water represents the hidden realms. He was hidden. He was directly from the hidden realms, and as he was pulled out of the water as is and put into this world straight from Atzilus. In fact, and Chassidus explained that's why Moshe had a speech impediment. Speech is the idea of communication. Moshe had an issue communicating with everyone else because his neshama was such an incredibly high neshama that his spiritual difficulty to communicate with us expressed itself also physically in his physical speech impediment.
All those that were born with the light, are they all from Atzilus?
All those who were born, sorry?
You know, like it says, Moshe Rabbeinu was born with light. So are all those from Olam Atzilus?
There are other people also, it says that about them, by Moshe.
Yes, it says
Yeah.
others, sure.
I don't know. I don't,
There's a whole bunch of
really.
Yeah.
It's possible. I don't know. So you have these different worlds. So the world of Atzilus is a world of absolute bittul. That's where the Yud of Hashem's name is revealed. The next world, which is the world of Bria, again, we're using the word world, but this is the next Madrega in Kedusha, the next Madrega in holiness, is the Madrega of Bina. That's where Hashem's Bina is manifest. And by the way, that is known as Olam HaBriya. It's also known as Gan Eden HaElyon, the higher level of Gan Eden. And what happens, what defines Olam HaBriya is Seichel. A Seichel. Bina.
Why Berea? I don't understand. When you translate Berea to Bina, what's the shaykh?
Okay, the truth is we can really give 5 classes on this, so to stop and I'll answer this question, but I just want to point out that the reason why is, what does Bria mean? What does creation mean? What does it mean that something is created? Everything is dach einod movadei. Creation means the moment that something receives an identity, it is a creation.
Yes, ma'am.
Until it has an identity, then it's still what's called elokus. It's godliness. It's not elikah, but elokus. Atzilus is elokus because it's chachma, it's bittul. Where does identity begin?
Berea.
In Olam HaBriya, which is bina. You see the connection?
Is that like separate identity?
Right, a separate identity, because that is what separates us from Hashem is our identity, nothing else. There is no, in other words, in reality, there is no separation. In reality, Hashem is everywhere and pervades and permeates everything.
Is identity the same as ego?
Yes, self-identity.
I promise you he's going to get to the idea soon. If you're a little bit lost, it's okay, because he will review it about this idea of taking from this up here, taking the mitzvah and connecting. He'll get to it soon. Bezrat Hashem. Don't lose hope.
Identity, ego, for the purposes of our discussion, we're talking about the same thing.
So this gets in the one.
Our ego gets in the way of our relationship with Hashem, exactly.
And our identity.
As to the point, I mean, take it to the extreme. The Gemara says in Masechta Saita that when Hashem sees a balgaiva, an arrogant person, He says, "Ein ani v'hu yechelim lader." Me and him, we cannot coexist. So in other words, and it doesn't say that about someone who does big averis, which is fascinating. Who is the person who Hashem can't coexist with? But why? Because you kicked Hashem. The balgaiva kicked Hashem out. It's not the. In other words, the biggest stira, the biggest contradiction to having a relationship with Hashem is ego. The less ego you have, the more relationship you have. The balgaiva was the ultimate egotist. But he unilaterally decided to what's called doichik ragli hashchina. He decided to push Hashem away from his life.
If it's put there, then it seems like that's major work to be done to overcome, to get back to the...
So there is the feeling and consciousness of bittul, and then there is mitzvahs, which is also, we're going to learn about that later on in chapter 35. What's so great about mitzvahs is that it's the ultimate act of bittul. That's why it connects us to Hashem. In other words, I can sit and I can feel holy and spiritual all day, but at the end of the day, it's me. How do I become batal to Hashem? Where do I really lose my ego? When I don't do anything and I do just what Hashem wants. But again, today we're going in many different directions.
Is there consciousness not a mitzvah in itself?
Is the consciousness of
where we really come from, who we really are, before we get into this physical body and separate identity.
World of Yitzira, which is Gan Eden HaTachton, the lower level of Gan Eden. And that's the place where it's all about emotions. In fact, when it talks about the different malachim that there are the intellectual malachim and there are the emotional malachim. The Eifanim and the Chayes HaKodesh, they're the emotional malachim. That's why they're Berash Gadol. That's why they are busy making a tumul. Emotional people are people who make tumults. And they're the malachim who inhabit Olam HaYitzira. Then they're the higher malachim, which are the Shrafim. They're the intellectual malachim. They're in Olam HaBriya. So Olam HaBriya is a world which is characterized by intellect And Olam HaYetzira is a world which is characterized by emotion. And those are the two levels of a Gan Eden. And once again, you can have a person who's over here in this world on the level of Bria, a person on the level of Yetzira. And then you have the Olam Asiyah, which is the last world, which is a place where there is no spirituality felt whatsoever, no emotion, no intellect, and certainly not that higher level of bittul. So when we talk about doing a mitzvah, and the mitzvah having wings and flying up, so it's very easy to have these visions, the little white wings on the mitzvah and it's flying up somewhere. But what it really means is that I'm injecting and infusing my mitzvah with a neshama, with a holiness. And the question is, what level of holiness am I infusing into my mitzvah? So when I do a mitzvah with love,
That's an emotion.
and that's an emotion.
Love is emotion.
Love is an emotion.
Fear also.
So if I'm a tzaddik and I do a mitzvah with absolute bittul, not even the bittul, not even love of Hashem, higher than love, higher than everything.
How would you describe that?
I describe it as what's called the total and complete bittul.
That sounds like
Oh, but there's no motivating factor involved. What motivates him to do it? It's the love that's the motive that gives you the motive. It's the motivating factor. What motivates somebody without no love, no fear? Okay, it's hard to relate to that.
We learned about it in my father.
But that in itself is love.
No, that's it.
And Perik and Gimel and Alter Rebbe.
I'm gonna stop the video part. Of him right now, and I'm gonna read the last few lines of the parak because it'll help to coalesce some of this. Let me go here and here. Okay. Let's see. Oh, do I not have it on the screen? Oh, I don't even have it. Okay. If you have the text, it's fine. It's like 3 lines. If you don't, it's not in front of you right now. Sorry about that. Okay, but I'm gonna just read this, and because he's gonna use terminology that Rav Silverberg was using, so you'll hopefully pick up on that. So what happens then, as a result of our emotions taking over and our brain kicking in and our contemplating and all, when we connect, when you have this good intention, the machashava tova, which we now have defined as being, I want to do the mitzvah the right way, Hashem connects it, kedei ha'alot ma'aseh mitzvot, ve'esek ha'torah, Hashem takes that and it lifts it up. Again, we're talking in a spiritual way, not in a physical way. When we do a mitzvah, when we learn Torah that are done and motivated by this machashava tova, it's motivated by our intellect, where we've had the intellect say, I really want to do this the right way. Ad olam habriya takes it up from the next level. This is what's called olam ha'asiyah, the physical, the action. Right? I can theoretically take my tefillin and wind it around and have absolutely no intention, no anything. It's just a physical act. Once I've infused it with that idea of I want to do it the right way, I want to do it with yir'ah, and then Hashem connects those two, the idea and the actual action together to then lift it up to the next level of olam habiriyah, as he referred to on the tape. Makom aliyat haTorah v'mitzvot, which are motivated by the intellect, which has caused the person to do this mitzvah. Even without that, they still will go up to olam hayetzira, to the next level. So he's telling us like this. Needs screen share here. It's telling us like this. We win both ways. First of all, if you do the mitzvah the best way possible, actually, and you really do have the right intention and it's coming from the heart and everything best, then it flies up. And if you don't do the mitzvah the best way, but you said this idea of l'shem yichud kucha brichu, or you say hineni muchan mzuman, or you stop and say, I really want to do this the right way out of yirah and ahava, even though I may not be able to do it. In both cases, what you're able to do is to elevate that mitzvah through Hashem's helping us of the connection between these two separate entities, the actual action and the intention to do the action, at least the desire to want to do it the right way, combining it and having it go. Now, these last few lines that I kind of ran through itself can be a very long class, and I'm not going to spend any more time on it tonight, because it talks more, and he started telling us about the Svirot, which are the divine emanations, which I've mentioned a long time ago, which I really don't want to get into tonight at all. I want to just kind of give you a little teaser for next time. Now, the next time is going to be in about 3 weeks. I'm leaving Bezrat Hashem Monday evening, the night of Lag BaOmer, for Chicago to go to a Simcha, Baruch Hashem, to a Bar Mitzvah in the family. So we'll miss a couple classes. I'll be back together right after Shavuot, Bezrat Hashem. Unless I can get my act together and do this from Chicago, I'll let you know. If I can do this 11 o'clock in the morning there, so why not? We'll see. But a little bit of a teaser, which I sort of mentioned already, but I'm going to hit it with you again. The whole book was based on a pasuk, right? We saw this when we first started learning Tanya, after the introductory class. It's based on the pasuk that says, Ki karov elecha davar me'od beficha uvavcha la'asoto, that it is exceedingly close to you and basically easy, both in terms of your thought, speech, and action, to accomplish mitzvot. And until now, until we get to chapter 17, we've really yet to identify, what do you mean it's easy? Not only is it easy, I shouldn't say easy, it's karov, it's attainable, that's the word I meant, not easy. But not only is it attainable, but it's exceedingly attainable to do. How? We now have, based on 16 chapters of Tanya, enough of a basis to explain, starting in the next chapter, chapter 17, how it's exceedingly attainable. How is it? We'll have to come back to Bezrat Hashem next class. In the meantime, I want to wish you all a good evening. If we don't have class when I'm in Chicago, feel free to roll the tape, look at some of these again if you're a little confused by some things. And just, again, I've said this many times, there are going to be things in Tanya you're going to pick up and understand right away. Some things can be a little bit maybe beyond the immediate comprehension, and that's fine. That's why people, not me, but that's why people, especially Chabadnikim, will go over Tanya in their lifetime literally hundreds of times. I always like when Rav Silberg would be giving a class and say, he'll be in chapter 12. So yeah, in chapter 35, we'll do this, in chapter 39, and the Geret HaTshuva, and this. It's like it's here. It's on his fingertips. He's probably gone through it hundreds of times. But I'm satisfied with just looking at it. So Bezrat Hashem will get together in the near future. I'll let you know when, and have a wonderful evening, everybody.